Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Van Maren, and welcome back to the Van Maren Show on LifeSiteNews.com. Today, we're going to be talking to one of my friends from Florida, a longtime pro-life activist who has an incredibly unique story in the pro-life movement. Just to give you an idea of how unique his story is, he spends all of his time outside a single abortion clinic in Orlando, Florida, and his work has been used to save more than 2,000 babies. His story is really just quite staggering. His name is John Barros, and he has felt called to go outside an abortion clinic and call out to the women who are entering that abortion clinic. He sees incredible things happen, and he also sees incredibly dark things take place. I don't want to get into too many of the details because, of course, John will be telling us all about what he experiences in front of that abortion clinic in just a moment. But I just wanted to describe a couple of the experiences I've had in front of that same abortion clinic. Most of you probably know that I work full-time for a Canadian pro-life organization called the Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform. And each February, we take students from Canada down to Florida for 2 weeks, and we go on campus and we do outreach with abortion victim photography. We engage students in conversation on abortion, and we see them change their minds. We see them cancel their abortions. We get to see these incredible things happening. And of course, Canadian students who are on spring break from their own education are more than happy to spend it in Florida. And at the same time, they get a full crash course in pro-life apologetics and what it looks like to be on the front lines of the abortion wars. And so what we try to do each year is take them to meet John Barros out in front of his abortion clinic so they can also see what it's like to stand in front of an abortion clinic, what it's like to see heavily pregnant women walk inside, and to feel that extreme urgency. Being outside an abortion clinic, of course, is an 11th hour ministry, we call it, and you literally have many times only a few moments to call out to them, to offer them help, to beg them to change their mind. And every time we're there, we see babies get saved, we see women cancel their abortions, and we, of course, see many women who do not change their mind. It's one of the most emotional things I think you can experience. It's a real roller coaster when you're being there. Just the overwhelming joy at seeing somebody cancel their abortions, but then just the absolute sense of helplessness you get when you see somebody walk into an abortion clinic. You know that while you're outside, her baby is being dismembered inside, and there's nothing you can do to stop her. So I really wanted to just have John Barros on the podcast, on the show, to discuss his experiences so that all of you can get a better idea of what it's like to be out in front of an abortion clinic, what it's like to call out to women in the last moments before they make that fateful decision, and so that you can hopefully share in that experience a little bit and get an idea of what this portion of the pro-life movement is all about. So here's my conversation with John Barros. My first question would be the question I ask everybody who's involved in the pro-life movement or fighting abortion in any way full-time, which is, when did you first become aware of abortion, and when did abortion first become real to you?
Abortion first became real to me about 15 years ago when my pastor brought me down to the abortion clinic that I now serve in front of.
This is your Pastor R.C. Sproul?
No, this was my pastor, Jim Fitzgerald.
Okay.
And he brought me down, and I actually didn't even want to come, but he kind of bribed me. He said, "Hey, I'll buy you a cigar if you go." And so I went, and I hated it. I hated every minute of being here, and but then I just kept coming on Saturdays when I could with him and all of that kind of thing. And then never dreamt that I would end up being here now for 9 years all day long, every day, serving at this place that I hated then and I still hate today.
So walk people through that. You're in front of an abortion clinic in Orlando, Florida, 6 days a week, all day long, and you started off going there with one of your pastors just to do a bit of sidewalk counseling and reaching out. How did you get this transition from going on Saturdays, being a part-time volunteer, to somebody who's dedicated full-time to actually fighting abortion, but specifically in front of this one clinic? Because you've told me before, I remember asking you once how you felt called to the pro-life movement, and you said, I wasn't called to the pro-life movement, I was called to 100 feet of sidewalk. So, like, tell that story. How did you get from a Saturday volunteer to somebody who's been out in front of the same clinic for almost a decade now, every day?
Well, I had some really bad health issues. I got cancer, and they told me I had 6 months to live, and that was a real wake-up call. And then I was able to beat that. Can't go into all the stuff; it would take forever, but able to beat that, and then ended up with a couple of brain aneurysms and had some brain surgeries. And so when I was through all that, I was pretty much brought down to nothing. And I came down to the abortion clinic because I had seen God work there before. And I sat on the wall here, and a young lady came walking up. I asked her if I could talk to her, and she sat there with me, and we talked about an hour and a half, and then she ended up choosing life. And I had this overwhelming feeling that I should be here, and I just said, Lord, if this is what you want me to do, take care of my family. And I'm in my 9th year now.
So how old are you now?
I'm 64.
And you've been in front of the clinic for it's 6 days a week. And when do you show? Give us an idea of what your average day looks like in front of the abortion clinic there.
Okay, it's not 6 days a week any longer. It's 5. I can't do that anymore, and I have a friend named Doug that comes here on Saturdays from our church. So
okay,
so our church handles. Our church is here every hour this place is open.
So what does your average day look like?
Well, I arrive between 7:30 and 8 o'clock, and then I get everything set up, and then the people start arriving, and I hand them some brochures, the In the Womb tract from Ray Comfort at Living Waters, and the brochure for a pregnancy center that is close by, 10 minutes from here, named Choices. And that's all I offer the people as far as paperwork goes, but I offer them that we will take care of them, meaning my church, St. Andrew's Chapel, that we will take care of whatever it is that they need, whatever hurdle they think they have to overcome to keep their babies.
And so when you started this ministry, going out there all week, when did your church step up and say, we will support you 100% in this ministry? Because I know when you started, you were just somebody who felt called to be outside this clinic, speaking to the women who were going into that clinic. But at some point, your church stepped up and said, you can offer these women whatever it takes to cancel their abortion. And I still remember very vividly the first time I saw you in church, when we were out in Florida doing pro-life activism, and we went to your church on Sunday, seeing you in a pew full of mothers and babies. That was quite something to see. So how did your church become such an important part of what you do?
Well, actually, the church that I was at changed pastors, and the pastor there, he didn't like what I do. And actually, R.C. Sproul asked me to come over, and I went over to St. and met with the elders and R.C. and Pastor Burke and Pastor Kevin and now Pastor Don, and I just moved over there, and R.C. was the first one that said, John, whatever you tell them, we will do, and Pastor Burke has followed along with that. In fact, all of our pastors and elders follow along with that since the passing of R.C.
So I remember you telling me about a meeting that you had with R.C. Sproul and others when you were explaining your ministry to them. What was that meeting like?
Oh, that looking back, it was funny, but it was nerve-wracking at the time. They asked me to come to a session meeting with all the elders and pastors and explain what the ministry is. But they had a policy of having you just put everything you wanted to say on one sheet of paper. And I went home and I thought, how can I possibly speak of what goes on here on one sheet of paper? And then I had an idea that I would put the pictures of 9 moms and some dads and the babies and what God had done here for them in their lives, and without any writing, just the pictures, 9 of them. And I passed out the paper, and everybody says, "What is this?" And I told them what I just told you, that I would tell the story if they just pick one story of what happened with them. And so one of the guys pointed at a picture, and I explained what God did in their lives to bring them to keeping their babies, and several of them coming to Christ as well. And then another guy pointed at another one, and then I said, I know you guys this is a big church, you have a lot of business to do, but that's what I do. And then RC looked at me and said, John, I want to hear all of them. So
right.
I told all the stories, and the guys were excited, and it's been an exciting thing for our church, not just me, but for everybody in our church as well.
So how many babies have been saved from that clinic since this ministry began?
You know, I don't believe in counting. I mean, I post on Facebook. It's been pretty steady for all 9 years. That between 20 and 30 girls a month choosing life here and getting the help they need and keeping their babies, and you know, that comes to over 2,000.
Right.
But I don't count them because it's not me that does it anyway. I mean, I don't have the power to turn a heart that is dead set on ending their baby's life. I do not have that power. But when I preach here, it's God uses His word to literally plow up some very hard ground and open people's eyes, and they choose life.
So when you started coming to the clinic, how did you figure out what to say? I've as some of our listeners might know, I've been out in front of the clinic with you quite a few different times. I've seen many women decide against abortion. I think the best day that I've ever seen when I was out with you, and of course just our pro-life organization is in Florida once a year to do work on campuses, and so we always come out and see and see how your ministry is doing as well. But I think we saw 4 babies in one day get saved. But how did you figure out exactly what worked? Because now you have sort of a system of when you offer help, when you begin preaching, so that they can hear you in the waiting room. I remember at one point the waiting room was full, and you'd spoken through your bullhorn quite a bit. And then you said, now it's time to sing, because the speaking didn't bring anybody out. Sometimes singing helps. And I think we were in the 2nd or 3rd verse of Amazing Grace when one of the women who had rejected the help and ignored the words, it was that hymn that finally brought her outside. How did you sort of develop is probably the wrong word, but begin figuring out how exactly you were going to approach the women who were going into this clinic?
Well, there is no real formula. The funny, each of these girls, each of these ladies, they have their own story. They have their own history of where they're coming from, and the main thing is to let them know that you love them and that you're there for them. And then the main thing that brings them around is God's word. In Romans 1, it tells us that the gospel is the power of God unto salvation, and it's God's word that is the power here. There's no reasoning. Reasoning does not do any good. I could never claim that I said ever. It's always God using His word to open hearts and eyes and minds. I mean, that's the only thing it is. He promises to work through his word. He tells us that it's his power. Why would I even try to use anything else?
So that first time you were sitting on the wall outside the clinic, and just so that people can visualize it, you have the Orlando Women's Health Clinic. It has a flagpole in the front yard, and then there's a steep driveway going alongside the clinic. And when the women park at the back and come up that driveway, there's a wall on one side of it where many people sit. And I've heard you refer to that driveway as the Valley of Decision, because you have an opportunity to talk to the people as they come up the driveway before they go down the sidewalk and then down the walk to the front door of the clinic. And so when did you realize, as you were out front, that the work was being blessed and that people were canceling their abortions? For those of you who don't follow you on Facebook, if you want to read both about the darkest places in the abortion industry, but also be encouraged that lives are being saved every day, your posts are a great place to look for that. When did you realize that many women were going to change their mind and that this work that you were doing was being blessed?
By the fruit, by watching God turn their hearts. I mean, it's as simple as that.
One of the questions I often have to pro-life activists, because I know that pro-life work has very hard aspects to it, but I think you've said before that you're reminded when some of the young people that we have with us come to your clinic that it really reminds you of just how dark the place that you work at is. Because a lot of people, the idea that a baby is being pulled apart, 15 feet away from them it's really difficult to psychologically handle. And I don't think that should be something that is easy to handle. How do you cope with the fact that the place that you work is such a dark place?
Well, the way I cope with it is I've built some pretty good walls in around my heart, because it is. I mean, there's 20 babies a day getting killed here. I mean, it's 20 to 30 a day getting killed here, and then it's very difficult. So you build these walls of protection around yourself,
right?
And that's pretty much it. I mean, that and prayer. But as you refer to the kids coming here that you guys bring down, it often does open my eyes to how horrible it is, because I watch them break down, and I watch them start, literally coming apart. Some of the kids that come down here, when they're standing here in fresh realization of what's going on here, and it's hard to watch. It's hard to see, and but yeah, over time I've been able to. I don't know, build. Sometimes those walls come crashing down when it's particularly, a particularly sad situation.
Right. You've actually developed a relationship with a lot of the clinic workers over the years, and I remember you telling me one story that I'd like you to tell our listeners about actually having Thanksgiving in the abortion clinic.
Yeah, one day I was here. It was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and I was here with some Reformation Bible College kids, and they got done real early, and I said goodbye to the kids, but I had this overwhelming feeling to stay, so I stayed on and sat on the wall, and I was praying, and then the lady that runs these places hollered up the driveway and said, "John, come here," and I said, "No, I don't. I've had enough fighting for now. I don't want to fight anymore." And she goes, "No, come here. It's Thanksgiving." And so I walked down. I didn't know what in the world was going on. And I went down, and she grabbed my elbow like we were walking down an aisle at a wedding or something. And she brought me to the back door. And a guy in there came out the door and frisked me. And then they brought me in, and then the workers were serving me up a plate of turkey and food and stuff, and they were thanking me for being here, and I didn't even understand all of it, but I still don't. But at any rate, then the abortionist came out and at the table next to me, and we were able to talk, and we were able to, I was able to warn them all to get out, and because of what the sin is that they're doing. Told them I loved them all, that they were caught up in a machine that is extremely wicked and evil. And anyway, at the end of all that, I came out, went outside, and said, I guess we go back at this again on Friday. And they said, yeah, they thanked me again for being here all the years. And then I came out. And then a couple weeks later, I noticed some personnel changes. And I asked one of the ladies, I said, where is so-and-so, and how come so-and-so is over here now? And she said, nobody told you, John? And I said, told me what? And she said, after you gave that talk at Thanksgiving, half of the people quit. And we aren't able to run both of them now. And so the other one is shut down, and they turned it into a medical marijuana building now.
Okay.
But yeah, they had me in for Christmas too. I just had a stroke a couple of weeks ago, and my left foot is dead right now. But when I came back, they were literally clapping, coming over and hugging me, thanking me, telling me they were
the abortion
thinking of me.
Like the abortion clinic workers were.
Yeah.
Wow. Can you explain that cognitive dissonance? Like they thanking you for being there when essentially your presence there is used to deny them 20 to 30 customers a month.
Yeah, well, the individual workers here, I don't think they care about that. I don't think they care if the owners of this place are losing any customers. But I don't know. I asked them all. I said, I tell you every day you're going to hell and that you need to repent and turn from this place. I go, I don't understand, why you guys tell me you love me. And they said, because we know you care. We know that you love us. And that's basically the story between me and the workers. But yeah, it's tough. I've been able to see and help a lot of them get out of this place over the years.
How about the one elderly abortionist that you've frequently interacted with, and his name escapes me now, but one of the last times I was at the clinic, it's funny, I call it your clinic, even though you're out there trying to prevent the clinic from operating every day. The elderly abortionist who's actually promised to keep doing abortions until he dies. I know he's spoken very roughly to some young families that have come out to help you with your work before. What have your interactions with him been like? Is that Prendergast? Do I have that right?
No, that's the owner. You're talking about Randall Whitney.
That's right, Randall
Whitney lost his license, and so he doesn't work here anymore. And but I shared the gospel with him, and at that Thanksgiving deal, actually, and I spoke with him on several occasions, and I told him that if he repented of his sin and turned to Christ, that even what he's done, that God would forgive him. And he said, John, that's a problem for me. I believe there's more than one way. And I said, Randall, that is a problem. In fact, that is the problem. But I haven't been able to speak to him since, but he said he was going to come to St. Andrews.
Okay. So just to give people an idea of what an abortion clinic is actually like, because I think that, and I know you've said this before too, the reason so many Christians and even people who are pro-life are apathetic is because they never really try and conceptualize what an abortion clinic is and what is done at an abortion clinic. And some of the scenes that you described as normal for an abortion clinic are things that would absolutely horrify other people. When you say you've got these walls built up, I know what you mean. When you work full-time in the pro-life movement, you can't actually allow yourself to fully conceptualize what abortion is every day. I don't think any human mind can take the weight of that many murdered children. It's just not something that that we're outfitted to do. And so, just like a surgeon, as doesn't lose it every time they see something horrible and gory, a pro-lifer figures out how to do their work effectively without emotionally breaking down every time they're faced with the awful reality of what it is that we're fighting. But I remember you just even describing how hard it was to see women who were there for late-term abortions come out and march around the parking lot to rap music so that they could be dilated enough for their babies to be removed.
Yeah, it's tough. On Wednesdays here, they do their labor and delivery abortions. They begin them. They give a shot through the lady's abdomen on girls up to 24 weeks to try and stop the baby's heart. Then they put laminera sticks in their cervix to cause their cervix to start loosening up. Then they give them drugs to put them into labor, and then they go home. And then the next morning they come back with pillows and blankets and all that stuff, and then they get more drugs to put them into a deeper labor, and then sometimes they'll march them around in the back parking lot, to try and hurry up the labor. And it's pretty tough to watch all that going on.
One of the things that's been debated recently have you ever seen an abortion that's begun be successfully reversed?
Seen what successfully reversed?
An abortion that was in process, especially one of the abortions that takes several days, successfully reversed.
Not the labor and delivery ones. I believe it's always right. It's always the right thing to do the right thing. So sometimes you'll get them to repent in the second day of labor and go to the hospital. But even the nurse over there from the hospital has called me and said that John, they're very good at killing these babies. These babies are dead that you're sending these people over to.
Right. When you're talking to somebody who's gone through all of that, when you're talking to a woman who's been there and is in bad circumstances, I remember one instance when I was there with you, the woman was in an abusive relationship. How do you respond to all the various circumstances they present you with? Because everybody ends up at the clinic for a different reason.
Yeah, well, I've got a lot of helpers. The Choices has a lot of avenues that people can go down that are under any circumstance, from abusive relationships to whatever. I've taken girls all the way to Tennessee before to get to safe houses, to get away from the kind of guys that aren't too excited about them choosing life. And it depends on the individual person. It depends on exactly what they need. And so far, we've been able to find a way to help each and every one that has chosen life. I mean, I don't believe that God is going to have somebody choose life and then not have a way of escape from their situation.
So how do you manage to deal with angry boyfriends or angry husbands or just angry men who are taking the women to the clinic to have an abortion? Because it's not just true for the clinic you're in front of. If anybody who stands outside any abortion clinic for any significant length of time, we'll see boyfriends pulling their girlfriends in, sometimes pushing. You get a really, really interesting front row seat to what the woman's right to choose really is all about, and how often it is men making the decision because they want to escape their responsibility.
Well, number one, if I see that situation where somebody doesn't want one and somebody's pressuring them to do it, believe it or not, I have the phone numbers of the workers in here, and I'll let them know who they are, and then they will not do the abortion.
Wow.
Other than that, these workers have helped me get girls out of here and leave the guys just.
Yeah, do you ever have to face violence from the guys that show up at the clinics?
No, all these years God has protected me from any guys or anybody that would come after me to harm me physically.
So there's been threats, but nobody's ever followed through.
Right.
One of the things that I think is really important for people to hear is you've mentioned that you see 20 to 30 babies saved per month. Are there any stories that have particularly impacted you that you could tell us?
I mean, there's so many. There was one that's pretty crazy, really. I mean, there was a girl that showed up here one day and pulled up in a taxi and pulled down the street just a little bit. And she got out of her car and she had like her dress and her mannerisms and everything was like a 1950s movie star or something. And she came walking over, and I asked her if I could talk to her, and she came up, and we started talking, and she had started saying she was a Muslim, and that she said it was the 40th day, and she had to have her abortion. And I said, what is the 40th day? And there's some sect in Islam that believes that a baby is not a baby until 40 days after conception. And that the angel Gabriel blows a horn and brings life to the fetus.
Okay.
And so I kept talking to her, and I'm saying, what in the world? I said, I've never heard that. And I said, well, we started talking, I started sharing scripture with her, because Muslims will accept the Old Testament, and they believe that Jesus is a prophet, so they don't believe he's God, but, I just worked with what we had and kept sharing the gospel with her, and we talked again for like an hour, and then she started crying, and I said, can I pray for you? And she said, sure, and I put my hand on her shoulder and began to pray for her, and then when we were done, I sat down, and some of the scriptures we had covered were like, God hates the hands that shed innocent blood, and Proverbs 6, and shared about Galatians 6, about be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatsoever you sow, you're going to reap. And anyway, after the prayers, she began crying pretty hard, but then she jumped up and ran in the sidewalk in front of the place to go inside and said, I'm sorry, John, I'm sorry, I have to do this. It's the 40th day. And she went in, and then a friend of mine was driving down the street, and she pulled over, and she said, what's going on, John? And I told her, and then we just sat here to pray. And then about 20 minutes later, out comes this girl with a big smile on her face. And she says, John, I jumped up and I said, you're not going to do this. And she said, no, I'm not. And she goes, but you can't touch me. Only my husband is allowed to touch me, because I had prayed touching her shoulder.
Right.
And she said, she came over and sat down, and she's trying to get her new airline flight, get checked out of her hotel and all that. And it turns out she had told her husband in Bahrain that she was going to go visit relatives in Indonesia, and then she flew to Indonesia, but then she got on another plane and flew here, and went by her hotel, dropped off her luggage, and then came right here. And so I asked her, I said, young lady, what was it that got you? And she said, that verse you said about reaping what you sow. I was sitting in there filling out the papers, and I thought, what shame would I bring upon my family, upon my husband, if I was to die in here on this table, in this awful place? And so anyway, she ended up flying home. I know I'll never be able to get a hold of her or anything, because, of course, she's not able to tell anybody any of this stuff. But it was that was quite a story. I told her, I said, I'm so sorry that you flew halfway around the world to come to this place, and I was the best thing you got to see. And she was just, I do not know how to explain that one. It was just so cool. I mean, I just couldn't believe it, that God cared about this lady enough over there, a Muslim lady, that he would stop her here in front of this place.
That of all the clinics she went to, she ended up going to the clinic you're in front of and bumping into you first.
Yeah, and because these guys advertise a lot, probably more than anybody, but we get a lot of people from other countries here.
So, are there any of the children that have been saved from abortion from those clinics that are still in your life? I remember the very first time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and this is more common, I know, for you, because I see your pictures, than for other people. Because like I've gotten to hold one baby, and their mother, his mother, had canceled an abortion after seeing one of our displays. But it's not as if I can regularly, see children that have been saved by pro-life work. That's not the same for you, is it?
No, I can see a lot of them. I do not get involved in their lives too much. I mean, I can't. I'm a guy. But I have ladies literally that follow up. I just had another girl text me. I just posted it last night about that she was thanking for being here, for me being here, and that she had come out during the preaching, and she sent a picture of her little girl. And it's awesome. It's just, I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, I guess the last question I'd ask you is just how would you describe being in front of an abortion clinic every day for those who find the very idea impossible to grasp?
Well, you see, there's something different. I have a lot of people that come when they can to do this. But myself, I think I've been called here in a special way because I can't imagine not being here. When I was in the hospital after having that stroke, I was like, man, I got to get down there. I mean, there's just this thing, I don't know how to explain it, that I absolutely need to be here and can't imagine not being here. It's not like, it's not the same as when I could only come every once in a while or whatever. It's kind of a different thing.
Right. Well, John, thanks so much for taking the time to talk about your story with us.
Well, thank you, sir. God bless you for all you guys do up there.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was my conversation with John Barros, who stands outside an abortion clinic 5 days a week in Orlando, Florida, and gets to see the brightest light in the darkest darkness. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and head over to lifesitenews.com for more news, for more commentaries, and if you want to listen to any of the past episodes of this podcast, we've interviewed intellectuals, pro-life, pro-family warriors. If you want to know what's going on in the culture, and if you want to know the stories of the men and the women who are fighting so hard to preserve our culture and rebuild a culture of life, please do check out past episodes of The Van Maren Show. Thank you so much for listening this week, and we do hope you'll join us again next week.